Hello, team. Thanks for joining us today. Today, we'll be discussing the topic of security awareness and how we keep information secure. So ultimately, as we know, we're entrusted with a lot of sensitive information, a lot of confidential information in the nature of the work we do. So we need to talk about ways to make sure we keep that information secure. There's a lot of day-to-day things that happen that we can do better or we can be aware of to make sure that we can keep this information secure. So what is security awareness? Security awareness is the knowledge employees possess regarding the safekeeping of information and how a company protects sensitive information, their assets, and or the assets of the customers. So ultimately is the knowledge we possess and the way that we handle ourselves and the way that we as a company protect the sensitive information is what makes up the security aspects of our job. So why is it important? Why is security awareness important? Often the human factor is the weakest link in a secure network. We can have all sorts of fancy computers and fancy code to protect the information that we're entrusted with, but ultimately is the human factor that often compromises that security. Social engineering attacks are becoming more and more common, creating and exploiting security vulnerabilities. So we'll define social engineering here in a sec, but to talk about how we're going to address these vulnerabilities, we'll be focusing on four factors as we go on with this presentation. Number one is education. So we'll talk about things we can do and educate ourselves or educate the group on things that we can do to keep information more secure. As well, we'll talk about the individual responsibilities. So each of us can start doing things or continue doing things to ensure that this information is secured as well. We'll also be discussing audits. We'll talk about things that we are going to be doing as a security department to ensure that we are maintaining focus on the task at hand and at the same time ensure that we are finding opportunities and gaps so that we can help close those gaps. We'll also be discussing and showing you guys a little bit of what the monthly reminders are going to be looking like. That way, as we get those every month, you guys know what to look for, and at the same time, we can continue to remind you as we go on our days, day to day, what's important and how we go about securing this information. So to start, we'll define social engineering. So social engineering in the context of information security refers to the psychological manipulation of people into performing action or divulging information that is confidential. So ultimately, the reason social engineering is effective is because it plays to the psychological aspect of tricking and manipulating people into giving out information they shouldn't or getting to talk about things they shouldn't. And at the same time, it gets people to act. It gets people to go against their instinct and try to help out in an urgent situation or in an urgent matter because this is how it's often presented. So things you must know. Social engineers do their research. Ultimately, the way that they're able to exploit people and manipulate people is because they're very knowledgeable. They find out a lot about the company, a lot about how things run. At times they find out the lingo that we use inside the company. They find out things that make them sound more credible when they call and are trying to obtain information. So picture if someone called pretending to be an employee and they know how we sound and they know the ways that we get things done in the company, they're able to fool you faster into trusting them and believing that they're also another employee of the company that just maybe has their system down and just needs information from you. What you post online can be used against you when it comes to an attack. So ultimately, there's things that we post on our day-to-day social networks, and if, let's say, a social engineer attacker way to find out who you are and that you work for this company, they can use that information and at times leverage against you. Malicious hackers also create personas and pretexts to gain information. So they pretend to be people that they're not. They pretend to work in areas that they don't so that they can have a story behind them, something that if you were to question, they know how to answer things that align with what they've created as a persona or the pretext that they're using to get information from us. It's also important to know that social engineers exploit your willingness to assist. Ultimately, as humans, we have this need to help people when they're in need. When there's an urgent situation, we feel like we must act, and they know that. They exploit that, and they exploit vulnerabilities that may result in the collection of confidential information. So we got to be aware of those things. We got to be aware that social engineers often find the weakest points in the company, the weakest people, if you may, as well, and they use that to collect information. So How do we prevent these attacks? So how do we prevent errors and things that lead to information being compromised or at times um, giving information we shouldn't? I put together a few different scenarios, a few different things so that you guys can see some do's and don'ts, so you can see how to better protect this information. So to start, we'll start with passwords. So real quick with passwords, and a lot of these you may already know, but it's important to remark that weak passwords are often made with easy to find information. So things to prevent making you passwords vulnerable is don't use names of loved ones, don't use the names of your spouses, your kids, your pets even. Don't use names of your first pet, your last pet, anything like that that may be even available in your social media. Don't use important dates, so your anniversary dates, your birth dates. Try to stay away from using these sort of things, as this is information that a social engineer could potentially find with ease and makes your password not very secured. Also, don't write down your passwords. Don't leave them anywhere near your desk. I know it's hard sometimes to remember password with the minimum length that's set up. Special characters and that sort of thing makes it hard, and often we have to change our passwords about every 30 days. So I understand it's hard to remember those. However, don't write them down. Don't put them on a sticky note and put them under your keyboard. This is a way that someone that were to get access physically to our company can log on to our network and do a lot of damage that way. So what are some things that you can do to help ensure that your passwords are strong? So make sure your passwords are complex. Make sure that you change them often. We do have the minimum required to change them every 30 days. However, do keep in mind using a mix of upper and lowercase letters is important, as well as using numbers and symbols within your password. When you change your password, don't repeat recently used passwords. So don't just go ahead and keep the last one that you used and maybe change the last character. If possible, try to create your own password every time so that it's more secure that way. Also, don't add hints. A lot of people add hints to the password in case they forget, and that's just an easy way to give someone access to your computer, give access to the secure information that you're entrusted with. And never share your passwords. So next I want to talk a little bit about phishing. So what is phishing? Phishing is one of the most utilized attack vectors used by social engineers. These attacks are often emails and websites in an attempt to gather personal information or restricted information, and at the same time compromise a secure network. So usually attackers pretend to be legitimate entities or persons of authority to trick someone into releasing information or get them to click a link or open a document. So pretend that you get an email from the CEO of the company asking you click here, or respond with this, or open this website and check this report. Social engineers know it's something that we might be inclined to do as employees, so be mindful of that. They often are requesting you to act with urgency. So don'ts when it comes to phishing. So again, social engineers rely on creating a sense of urgency. Often these emails require that you act now, or rely on your fear of missing out and your instinct to comply with the request, especially when it comes from someone with authority. So things to keep in mind and don't open emails from unsolicited senders. So if you're not expecting an email from the accounting department and you get an email from the accounting department, that might be a quick sign of something might be up, right? And something might be a little fishy that way. So be mindful of that. Don't open links or files unless you're expecting them. So if you get, let's say, the same email from the accounting department and it says to check your last income report and click on this, if you're not expecting that, that's a sign of something we should be careful of. And also be mindful of links that come from a source that is not trusted, one you can't confirm. So be mindful of that. Also, don't reply to emails that you find suspicious. Just report them to your security department, and we'll have a way for you guys to check within your own emails to report phishing emails, and we can take a look at them that way. And you can also forward those to me. I'll provide you guys my email at the end of this, so you can forward any emails you find suspicious, and we can investigate them that way. So what are some things that you can do to help keep information secure? So be aware of phishing attacks and approach each unsolicited email with a sense of skepticism. I know at times we want to trust others, we want to trust other departments, but being skeptic of things is the best way sometimes to keep information secure. So if something is not expected or something looks out of whack, make sure you report the suspicious emails. Make sure you report the situation to your manager or someone here in the security department. Ensure the sender of the email is someone. Another thing you can do is ensure that the sender of the email is who they claim to be. So, for example, if you get an email from the CEO, or maybe you get an email from one of our directors, one way you can, validate that is maybe talk to your management. Maybe talk to your manager and ask, hey, am I supposed to be getting an email from a director asking for this? Or did you hear anything about the CEO reaching out to us about X or Y? And that's one good way to make sure we don't fall for these attacks. So just ensure that if you get an email from someone with authority and you're not expecting it, make sure you validate they are who they say they are and that you're supposed to be taking action on those emails. Also, be aware of misspellings and grammatical errors. This is a big one when it comes to phishing. Often, social engineers, as much as they do their research and they find things out, they misspell words, and sometimes in a way to trick us, right? They might have an email that comes from a domain similar to us. So maybe they say instead of SX Tech, maybe they misspell it and put one S, and that way when you get the email, it seems like it's from one of our internal emails, but if you really pay attention, you'll notice it's misspelled. Also, as they go on with the email or the definition of what they're trying to get accomplished, often they might make grammatical errors, misspell things. So be mindful of that. That's often one dead giveaway when it comes to phishing emails. Also verify or check with your superiors. Again, like I mentioned, when you're in doubt, if there's something that you get an email asking you to do something and you're not expecting it, make sure you check with your superiors or not. And you can check with us also in the security department. We can help you identify if this email is actually coming from within the company. So I want to talk a little bit about phishing. I won't go into do's and don'ts for this one, as it's very similar to phishing. So the only difference is phishing is another attack vector used by social engineers, and often it's just done over the phone. So the goals is often the same as phishing attacks. They just conduct them over the phone or utilizing communication channels that require them to speak directly with someone. So be mindful of that. Again, the same applies here. If you get a call from someone that you're not expecting, or if you get a call from someone claiming to be someone from the company or someone in authority, make sure you're skeptical of some of these things and follow the same steps we just talked about. Now, data breach. This is a big one for us, right? We have a lot of information. We have a lot of confidential stuff that we are entrusted with and that we have within our servers. So social engineers often target a company's network as a means to get information to this private information. Any employee of the company can become a target, whether you're an entry-level employee or you're the CEO. They target anyone and everyone that they can potentially target to get access to our networks and our servers. So password needs to be secure. Employees must be aware of phishing and vishing attacks, because the ultimate goal is for us to prevent these attacks and to make sure our network is never compromised. So be mindful of that. Now, some things to keep in mind, some don'ts. A secure network becomes vulnerable when an employee acts carelessly and forgets protocols that are in place to prevent a breach in security. So some things to keep in mind here: don't insert any unknown flash drives or any storage devices that you find into your work computer. A lot of times social engineers will just leave a flash drive or a memory card somewhere and expect that someone just picks it up and is curious enough to plug it in and see maybe what's in it. And through that, they can plant things like reverse shell software and things that will give them access to our network remotely. So be mindful of that. It's very important. Also, don't leave any information that's important laying around. So make sure that if there's anything that is important that you shred it after you don't need it, don't just leave it on your desk. Put them away. If you have a drawer that you can lock at the end of the day, make sure you put it there and lock it up if it's important. Also, one thing you can do here is don't put data on removable media. So don't put important information, important things on flash drives and things like that that are storage devices that you can move around. The reason for that is if they become lost, it will be hard for you to recover that data. At the same time, it becomes very easy for someone to just plug that in, and if they know what they're looking for, they can find some very good and very confidential information based on the stuff you're saving on those drives. So some things to do here, right? Make sure you're following proper authentication at all times before releasing or discussing information. That is going to be key in keeping information secure. Again, we have protocols in place, so make sure you follow those. Shred important documents when they're no longer needed. Don't use the internet for anything that's not related to your work. When possible, or when applicable, also use encryption. Use strong passwords to protect documents if it's an option. And when in doubt, again, don't provide information and check with the superior. Check with the security department if it's applicable. So if you're getting a request, if you're getting a call, if you're getting anything, someone wants to send you a file, again, if you're skeptical of it and you're just not sure if it's someone that should be sending this information or something you should be doing, make sure you check with us. Now, I also wanted to provide you just a little bit more information behind how these things happen, and it's through malware. Some of these attacks that happen and some of the way they get through and compromise our servers is with malware. So as a definition, is software intentionally designed to cause damage to a computer, a server, or a computer network. It's usually introduced in the form of executable code, scripts, other software that, again, runs when you click it, when you open it. So be mindful of those things. So tips for success: report to your IT department or to us in the security department if your computer becomes slow, or if it's crashing often, or if you get a lot of pop-ups. These are often signs that the computer might be compromised in the sense of, it's running a lot of programs that you're not aware of, and it's what's maybe causing them to be slow. Also, report any instances where you believe your computer have been compromised. If you got that email, if you got that flash drive that you plugged in, and now you're concerned that you might have compromised our network or your computer, make sure you bring it up to us. We can take a look at it. We can see if there's any damage that's been done, and we can take it from there. Also, update your programs and run your antivirus when requested. This is one big way that we keep information secured. We often update our programs, we often update our antiviruses, and we often make sure those are running to make sure that our computers and our servers are secured. So make sure you're doing that. Also, social media is a big thing when it comes to, again, how information is compromised. We talked about it here at the beginning of the presentation, but the reason it poses one of the biggest threats is because lately it's become one of the most targeted areas for social engineers. With as many people as there are online, you can imagine a lot of information is being shared that way. So never use your social medias when you're at work or on a work computer. And also be aware that your social media is targeted when it comes to these attacks. So tips for success. So again, never log into your social media accounts here at work. Beware of what information you share online. Know that it could be used against you later if there's anything that compromises you. Make sure you're mindful of that. And also a big one here, even though we trust our friends and we love them to death, make sure you're aware of this. Sometimes your friends can be the ones sharing malicious links. Sometimes their accounts may be hacked and things are being shared to you expecting you to click on it or share it or comment on it. But again, be mindful of that. Your friends don't always know what they're posting. They might get a link and it might be outrageous to them in the subject line, and they just think, oh, I gotta share this with everyone, and they may share something that is actually a malicious code, and when people click on it, it compromises their computer. And again, that's why it's very important that you never log on to your social medias here at work, in the case you were to click on one of these malicious links. Also, never respond to company-related questions unless you're authorized to do so. You might have someone that's just trying to push your buttons and trying to get information from you because they know they work here. So again, be mindful of these things. Don't speak for the company unless you're authorized. And if you are, even then, be careful of what information you're confirming, what information you're, providing online when you're getting these discussions with people. Now, physical security. You guys see when we come in, we have all these fancy gates, right? You have to badge in to get through one area, get to the other. We have access codes that we provide you guys. We have a lot of things that keep this building actually secure. So it's just as important that you're aware of the physical security aspects of your job. So while social engineers often conduct their attacks through the phone or through the web, there are times they have to potentially get in the building physically to accomplish their task and to get done what they need to do. So I want to share some do's and don'ts for security when it comes to the physical aspect of it. So only authorized personnel must have access to secure areas. So you must never allow any person to access these areas or these computers. So Ways to do this: don't walk away from your computer without locking it first, in case someone is or may already be in the building. It's one quick way to keep information secured, is making sure your computers are locked. Also, never share your access codes, your keys, or your password with anyone. We talked about that when we talked about passwords. But also be aware of shoulder surfing and tailgating. So what those two are is, let's pretend that you're on your computer and you're about to unlock it, right? You're going to need to type your password. Beware of people maybe looking over your shoulders to see what you're typing as your password. Beware of people, looking over your shoulder to see what keys you're typing, or how you're getting logged on, right? Also, tailgating is another thing to be mindful of. This is when, let's say, you badge through the door and you're walking through and you notice someone walks very close to you just to get in before you close the door without badging themselves, right? Practically getting access to a secured area without confirming they're supposed to have access to this area. So be mindful of those things. That's another way that someone might physically get into our building if we are not mindful of, are they getting in the way they're supposed to. Also, don't open secure doors for strangers or unauthorized personnel, right? Someone might be at the door with all these boxes pretending to not be able to grab their badge and waving you down like, can you open the door for me? Be mindful of things like that, especially if you don't know who these people are, especially if it's a stranger. We know kind of who we work with on a day-to-day basis, right? When someone's new, we kind of come to know what that looks like. So be mindful of that, and be mindful of strangers. That's one way we can be, again, a little more skeptical and keep information secured. So some do's in this area. Again, beware of those around you. Pay close attention to new faces. Pay attention to what they're doing. Does it look out of whack? Does it look like something they should be doing or not? And report things that may seem suspicious. Ensure that others entering the building have the same access, the badges, the keys, the access codes they're supposed to have. Again, follow the security protocols we have in place. Lock up any sensitive materials. Make sure you lock your computers and your laptops. And again, dispose safely of any sensitive documents by shredding them when you don't need them. So those are ways we can help keep things secure. Now, we talked about audits. We talked about how we're going to make sure that things are controlled and that we can keep an eye on how things are going and whether or not we have gaps in knowledge and execution. So again, our goal is to promote a culture of security and awareness. So to proactively help identify areas of opportunities and close these gaps, audits will be completed throughout the year. So these audits will use some of the following. We'll be sending out phishing emails intentionally created by us to see whether or not you're clicking on those links and to see if we can find some areas of opportunities there. We also will be using the vishing method of calling and pretending to be someone and using methods to try to get information out of you and see if you're susceptible to this sort of thing, and again, close the gaps there. We'll also be doing compliance reviews and observations. That is not necessarily anything new, right? We already listen to calls. We already have a compliance team that makes sure that we are following laws and regulations, but it's one thing for you to be mindful of. This is another way we can find gaps in knowledge and help address those. So to talk a little bit about the monthly reminders, this is what it will look like. So everyone in the company will be getting these emails. Every email will have a specific topic that we'll be discussing. This example that I pointed out here is talking about the actual security awareness itself, and it provides you some quick tips and things to remember. We will also be providing the actual document that you can click and go to and read as we send these out. But again, they're going to change in the topic every month or every time we send them. One may be about phishing, one may be about physical security, and so on. But this is what you want to look for. Again, they'll be titled reminders, and you'll see that it's coming from us. If you have any questions, please make sure you reach out to me or a member of the security department with any questions that you may have regarding ways to keep your information or our information secured and that information of our clients. My email is rfeliz@sxtech.com. So make sure if you have any questions, reach out to me directly. Again, we have a wonderful security department that can also help answer those questions and take a look at things for you. So again, thank you very much for your time. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day.